Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, where in today's video, I'm going to take you through my full analysis of the ACCA SBL examination pre-C materials for the March 2025 sitting for historic places. My name is James, welcome to part 2, and make sure you subscribe so you get access to the full series. And if you'd also like a copy of my notes you can see above me, click the link in the description of this video and you can download a copy yourself. I'm also delighted to say I'm associated and affiliated with Expenditure. They have pre-seen packs, mock papers. There are links down below for you to click to check them out. And for pure transparency, as always on the channel, if you were to purchase anything through the links down below, I've been entitled to a small percentage commission, which goes to supporting the YouTube channel. So as always, a massive thank you. If you have any questions, leave me a comment below. I will definitely get back to you. I'm going to get stuck into it straight away now. We're on to part 2. I need to come back down to here because there we go. Let's move on to the Heritage Charities Significant Stakeholders, a critical part of the pre-seed notes, so make sure you've got a pen and paper to get these down. We've given a breakdown, as you can see on the left-hand side, so we've got everything from the trustees, executive management. I'd be, if I was in your position, making sure that you can picture all of these different stakeholder groups, whether they're internal or external. And the other little factor I put on the side there is, are the stakeholders paid or not paid? And the pre-seed notes, they tend to refer to that the general public don't like to see that charities are being a bit wasteful with their donations and money. And if you're getting paid and you're working for a charity, that could come back to haunt you on there. So again, that's why I've noted it down. We have the trustees that are the first significant stakeholder group, should I say. They are not paid, and you really need to go through these and properly understand the roles, responsibilities, accountability of each of the different groups. And the key roles are pointed out for each area. So the trustees are individuals who oversee a charity's activities, and they are responsible for the charity's objectives and constitution and compliance with regulations. They should ensure the control and risk of management systems and making sure that it's effective, that the charity is being managed with honesty and integrity to develop the strategic direction with the executive management. Now, I know that's a lot to take in, but there are so many different areas there that overlap with risk and ethical areas and the accountability side, because we've got the income is dropping off in the charity. So they are a massive part, the trustees, in the performance. Trustees are accountable for the activities, which again links into the expenses and income on there. And we also have there the charity supervisory board and the general public. There's a little bit in blue, which we'll come on to later on, but do not forget or overlook the different areas, especially that charity supervisory board, because that could link into maybe penalties, fines, or who knows, a lawsuit. I'm thinking of worst case scenario now. Again, they've noted there, trustees are not paid for their time and receive no employment benefits. In other words, they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts on there. Maybe it's a charity close to their hearts, but they have lots of accountability to the performance. Coming on to now the executive management, and again, if you go to, I think it's page 6 or 7, you can see the breakdown of the members who are on the board, and they are employees, so paid to be responsible for the day-to-day operations. They normally meet regularly and as an executive board or committee. So we have remuneration committees, audit committees. We're not told who's on their committees, but the executive management are critical to how the business operates operationally. There are also other paid employees on there. So paid employees include the head office administrative staff and staff working full or part-time on the sites. We have later on in the notes a lot more of a breakdown, but there are over 4,000 employees. It is a big job running this charity on there. And remember, they are paid, which takes away the donations because they are costs associated to the charity. We next have the volunteers, which they have over 20,000 of them. You'll see that later on again, page 6 or 7, where we have more details of the stakeholders. And volunteers carry out unpaid work on there in their spare time and have no contractual obligations to keep volunteering. There are hints as you go through as to they could just cancel any time. They could just stop doing it. The charity historic places are very, very reliant on the volunteers, because they are the reason why people come to the site, spend the money, and the charity keeps going. There are also donors as well who give money to charities without expecting anything in return, and donors may give a one-off or regular basis. Again, an external stakeholder group, and they are critical to the finances of the charity. There are members as well, and they pay an annual fee or a one-off fee for lifetime membership, giving them the privileges to use the sites, go to see the objects that may be new for the charity. So the most important privileges that these members actually get are free admissions to the sites. They've paid their annual fee or the one-off lifetime membership. Again, linking to that sort of national trust setup on there. And the final key thing, don't overlook this, is that they also have on there the voting at the charity's annual general meeting, the AGM, and this includes electing trustees. So they do have a bit of say involved. Members do not own the charity and do not have any responsibility for its debts on there. So they are not the guarantors. Members are not the guarantors on there. We're not told who the guarantors are, but it's definitely not the members. We then come on to non-member visitors, and they pay admission fees to have access to the sites. I mean, if you've not paid for the membership fee, you're going to have to pay a one-off fee to come along on the day. We then have the guarantors. So guarantors guarantee a specified amount to help settle a charity's debts if the charity becomes insolvent, but are generally not otherwise involved with the charity's activities. So again, we're not told who the actual guarantors are. Maybe that could be something that could come up on the exam day just to be aware of on there. But I think it could be a point that could throw lots of students off if you've not read the pre-C materials in enough detail. We then have the Charity Supervisory Board, that's the CSB we've touched on, and they act on behalf of Odyssea's government in overseeing the charity's activities, and they are actually inputting a audit on historic places because they go over the threshold. So again, if you need to refer back to that, it's on page 2. All the details are there for the CSB, and they're not mentioned anywhere else in the pre-C materials. The last bit on this page for number 3 is really, really interesting as to, they've just got a little bit at the bottom there for media. And stories in the media can illustrate the good charity work that they're doing. However, it can also be a source of bad publicity. For example, stories about charities wasting money. So again, could be an exhibit on sort of social media, news articles. The reason why I say that is later on in the notes, you'll see we've got website extracts, but it's all about finding out who is paid, who isn't paid. That's why I've noted it, and highlighting that wasting money point on there. And the bit in blue I touched on before is all about stakeholders who give money or non-financial resources. Donors, volunteers, members on their non-member visitors are sometimes known collectively as supporters of the charity on there. So I've got that down as supporters of a charity. Again, could be a term used in a requirement on the exam day that could throw off someone who has not analysed the pre-C notes in enough detail. So it links into not just the actual people who donate on there, but it's also the volunteers and the non-members, a variety of different stakeholder groups. We can then come up to the heritage of the charity's income, and as you would expect, income and expenses or expenditure go hand in hand. And you can imagine that you can picture it in your mind. If you're a charity, how are you going to earn income? Well, you've got the donations, membership, admission fees, commercial activities, all the different bits in bold on there. And focusing on the key bits I've underlined in red, that'll be some of the different factors for you to consider in your answers. But about finding new ways to obtain donations, what they're getting at on there is that if they actually go through someone who's already a donor, they're more likely to respond via post, email and text, or maybe actually recommend a friend or a family member to sign up themselves. So charities encourage donations by advertising, adverts, television, social media on there. They also have on their websites, they can donate on there as well. And charities retain contact details of previous donors and focus marketing campaigns on obtaining further donations from them. So on one side, yes, they've donated before, they might be able to recommend the charity. However, you think to yourself, where are the alarm bells ringing from that? Well, what if the data and information of all those people who have donated gets let out into the public domain through a cyber data breach, something like that? Or what if there was a social media or adverts or newspaper article that showed historic places in a bad light? These are things that rattle through my mind, that you could go, on your exam day, something bad is going to happen, and that could fly up on there as to linking into areas that could impact on the income of the charity. It should be flare up. I've just remembered what I've just said. But we're getting on to membership, admission fees, commercial activities. Again, they've touched on it before. Membership fees, charged to non-members. The bit where we've got a lot more detail is the commercial activities. So you've got the smaller sites that have a sort of little cafe in it and sell the odd little bits and bobs. Whereas you've got the larger sites, which are proper larger meals on there, hospitality events, corporate events, weddings. And I've linked it into, well, what is more profitable? Is it worthwhile having some of these smaller facilities open? And is it a potential opportunity in a SWOT analysis to mention? Most of the sites actually have shops on there, as we touched on. They have a sort of guidebook and a variety of different products, linking into a cost-benefit analysis that you could pop in your analysis on an evaluation question to say, is it worth it? I mean, they also mention about branded with a charity's logo. How key is the logo? It's not mentioned before. And lastly, for the income, diversifying the income streams, that we also have the operation of their shops, which are not at all of the sites. Some are actually in shopping areas on there. And some charities also sell shop products online. Again, another SWOT analysis opportunity area that have historic places considered all of their different revenue streams. When it comes on to the heritage of the charity's expenditure now, so this is where, again, it does what it says on the tin, as you would expect, but the key bit for your notes is have a look at the chart on page 10. The site operating costs and the site maintenance and conservation costs and administrative costs are all on that diagram, where we're not given the exact figures, but rough ballparks are that the site operating costs, those are the day-to-day running expenses, staff, wages, is about $375 million on there. The middle costs of sort of maintaining the age and condition of the actual sites and the objects is about 290 on there, and this is undertaken by the charity's employees or contractors, or maybe even a one-off project. So again, this is where, because some of their actual artifacts and sites that they're looking after, they're over 300 years old, they're going to require a lot of cash, and the older they get, the more they're going to need to be maintained, and the more money they're going to need to do that. When it comes to conserving historical objects, as we've touched on, it's very complex, hard to find and source specialists. So again, the specialist areas and the contractors should be down in your stakeholder list to say, if we lose them from the books, it could be only going one way in terms of the actual charity on there for maintaining a good portfolio of places moving forward. And last but by no means least, we've got the administrative costs. So this is other costs associated with fundraising, that's the sort of marketing, admin side of it, the salary costs of the executive management, a variety of different areas, but charities can suffer bad publicity and attract less support if admin costs are believed to be too high. That is the second mention about costs and bad publicity that we've been told in the pre-scene notes, so make sure you note down that point about social media, potential news articles. Even though it's the lowest cost, that is one that is really prominent as to, well, what do people who are associated with the charity on there, what do they actually want to go and have a look at? The last part in terms of the income and expenditure, we have the Heritage Charities Challenges. Now, this is where, again, could link into a SWOT analysis, but little to no control over some of these costs, as they're going to increase anyway. As we touched on before, the older the objects on the site, the higher it's going to be. And we have areas like deterioration of sites and objects. It's really hard to preserve them. Natural conditions. There are some aspects about climate change and accelerating it on there. But the bottom line is we have wear and tear. It affects the sites. And if we don't maintain them properly, it could affect the number of visitors to particular locations. On the left-hand side, we have large charities, such as historic places on there, are also dependent on recruiting sufficient volunteers, shall I say, because if you don't have enough volunteers to manage the sites, that is where they're just going to be left on there. Volunteers are unpaid, remember, unpaid, and that saves the charity a lot of costs. But the factors for you to be aware of, the variables are the hours and attendance may not be regular. They may decide to stop volunteering on there. And the volunteers are the unique selling point to visitors enjoying the sites. So the heritage charities, they mention it here, face the challenge of seeking donations, and the potential donors are likely to receive communication from many charities on there. And charities which are in the news, particularly in times that may raise considerable sums of money. So if they have a good news article on there, they're going to get more bang for the buck and more donations that come in. But this may mean that donors give less to other charities. So there's an opportunity cost alternative there. And in Edisia, they're also in a recession, which is an economic factor for a pestle analysis, and has seen a fall in donations. So that means that donors in the past have previously given to historic places, and now they're thinking, well, oh gosh, I need to feed myself. I've got other things to bear in mind. So that is another factor for you to get down in your notes. Students will mess up that it is a recession, will talk about the wrong economic factors, and miss out on marks. Well, that takes us through part 2 now. I hope you've enjoyed the video going through those key notes. Be sure to subscribe and like the video so you can see the full range of videos in the series. And as I said, if you'd like a copy of my exclusive notes you can see on the screen, click the link in the description below, along with those Astranti mock papers and packs. They're definitely going to help you to get the 50+. But I'll see you on the other side now for part 3. So thank you very much.